12th time my family called the police on our new black neighbor, I finally understood that their fear had never been about safety. It was about control. For weeks, my daughter, my son-in-law, and even my own sister had watched his house, photographed his visitors, and reported every harmless sound from his yard. I begged them to stop, but they laughed and told me I was too trusting. Then one rainy evening, 3 firm knocks echoed through our home. When I opened the door, our neighbor stood on the porch, holding a sealed folder, and behind him were 2 police officers. What he said next made my daughter drop her wine glass. Before I tell you how one knock shattered everything my family had tried to hide, please like this video and subscribe. And tell me honestly in the comments, what would you have done in my place? I would also love to know where you are watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes it helps to remember that wherever we are, none of us faces these painful family choices alone. 3 months before that rainy night, I still believed my family's greatest problem was grief. My husband Robert had died the previous spring after 41 years of marriage. He had been the steady one in our family, the man who remembered birthdays, repaired leaky faucets, and somehow knew when an argument needed silence instead of advice. After he was gone, the house felt too large for me. Every room carried an echo of him. My daughter Melissa insisted that I should not live alone. "You're 71, Mom," she said one evening standing in my kitchen with her arms folded. "What happens if you fall? What happens if someone breaks in?" I reminded her that I still volunteered twice a week at the public library and walked 3 miles most mornings. But Melissa had already made up her mind. Within a month, she and her husband Daniel moved into my home. They called it temporary. At first, I was grateful for the company. Melissa cooked dinner. Daniel handled the heavier yard work. My older sister Carol, who lived 10 minutes away, began visiting almost every afternoon. The 3 of them filled the silence Robert had left behind. But gradually, their help began to feel less like kindness and more like occupation. Melissa rearranged my kitchen because she said my cupboards were confusing. Daniel installed security cameras without asking me. Carol began reviewing my mail, claiming she was protecting me from scams. Whenever I objected, they exchanged the same patient look. It was the look people give someone they have already decided is incapable. Then the house next door was sold. The previous owner, Mrs. Jenkins, had moved to Arizona to live near her son. Her house had remained empty for almost 6 months, and Daniel had become strangely interested in it. He often mentioned that the property would be perfect for expanding our yard. He even talked about purchasing it cheaply and turning it into a rental. "We could manage it for you," he told me. "It would create income and eventually both properties could stay in the family." I never understood why he said we when the money would have come from me. Before Daniel could make an offer, a new owner arrived. I saw him for the first time on a bright Saturday morning in early October. A moving truck was parked outside, and a tall black man in his late 50s stood on the sidewalk directing 2 movers. He wore jeans, a navy sweater, and work gloves. His hair was closely cropped with gray at the temples. When one of the movers nearly dropped a wooden desk, the man rushed over to help instead of shouting. Later that afternoon, he came to my door carrying a small bakery box. "My name is Marcus Reed," he said warmly. "I just moved in next door. I thought I should introduce myself." Inside the box were 6 lemon pastries from a bakery downtown. Robert had loved lemon desserts. For one painful second, I could almost hear him teasing me about eating 2 before dinner. I invited Marcus inside for coffee. He politely declined because he still had boxes to unpack, but he stayed on the porch for several minutes. He told me he had recently returned to the area after working in another state. He was quiet about his occupation, saying only that he had spent most of his career in public service. Before leaving, he handed me a card with his phone number. "If you ever need anything, Mrs. Parker, please call." That simple kindness should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning. Melissa was standing in the hallway when I closed the door. "What did he want?" she asked. "To introduce himself." "And why did he give you his number?" "Because that is what neighbors sometimes do." She looked through the window as Marcus crossed the lawn. I don't like it. I turned toward her. You don't even know him. I know he was asking questions. He asked whether I had lived here long. That's exactly what I mean. Her suspicion unsettled me, but I dismissed it as overprotectiveness. Melissa had always been cautious, especially after Robert died. Daniel reacted more strongly. When he returned from the hardware store and heard about Marcus's visit, his jaw tightened. So, he bought the place outright, he asked. I have no idea. Did he say what he paid? Of course not. Daniel walked to the window and stared at the neighboring house. That property was supposed to be a bargain. There was something in his voice that had nothing to do with safety. Over the following week, Marcus worked quietly on his home. He painted the porch railing, replaced a broken fence panel, and hired a crew to trim the old maple trees. Every morning he left shortly before 7 in a dark SUV. Every evening he returned alone. There were no loud parties, no strange visitors, no threatening behavior. Yet my family watched him constantly. Carol came over one afternoon and found Melissa reviewing footage from the security cameras. Who is that? She asked, pointing at the screen. The new neighbor. The footage showed Marcus carrying grocery bags from his car. Carol leaned closer. He doesn't look very friendly. He brought me pastries, I said. Carol gave me a sharp glance. That's how people gain trust. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She was not. The first police call happened 8 days after Marcus moved in. I was reading in the living room when 2 patrol cars stopped outside his house. An officer spoke with Marcus on the sidewalk, while another examined his vehicle. I hurried into the kitchen where Melissa stood holding her phone. What happened? I asked. She avoided my eyes. I reported a suspicious car. That is his car. I didn't know that. You have watched him drive it every day. Melissa's face hardened. It was parked near our property line for 20 minutes. He was unloading boxes. You can never be too careful. The officers left without taking action. Marcus remained on the sidewalk for a few moments, staring at the police cars as they disappeared. Then he looked toward our house. I stepped back from the window, ashamed, even though I had not made the call. That evening, I walked next door to apologize. Marcus opened the door wearing reading glasses and holding a file folder. Behind him, I saw neatly stacked boxes and several framed photographs waiting to be hung. One showed him in a formal uniform, but before I could study it, he shifted slightly and blocked my view. I'm sorry about what happened, I said. My daughter called the police. His expression remained calm, but the warmth I had seen on the first day was gone. Did she believe she was in danger? No. The word left my mouth before I could soften it. Marcus nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. I expected anger. Instead, he seemed tired. That was worse. I promised it would not happen again. At the time, I believed I could keep that promise. I did not yet understand that Melissa's call had not been a nervous mistake. Daniel's interest in the neighboring property had not disappeared when Marcus purchased it, and Carol's constant warnings were not simply the habits of an anxious older woman. They were all protecting something. 2 nights later, I woke shortly after midnight and heard voices downstairs. I stepped quietly into the hallway. Melissa, Daniel, and Carol were gathered around the kitchen table. A folder lay open between them, filled with property records and legal documents. Daniel tapped one page and whispered, "If he starts asking questions, the whole plan could fall apart." Carol lowered her voice. "Then make sure everyone believes he is the problem before he gets the chance." I stood frozen on the staircase, one hand gripping the railing. For the first time, I realized the police call might not have been caused by fear. It might have been part of a plan. I remained on the staircase until my legs began to ache. Below me, Daniel closed the folder while Carol gathered the loose papers into a neat stack. Melissa carried their coffee cups to the sink, as if they had been discussing nothing more serious than grocery prices. I wanted to walk into the kitchen and demand an explanation, but something stopped me. Perhaps it was Daniel's warning that the whole plan could fall apart. Perhaps It was the cold certainty in Carol's voice when she said they needed to make everyone believe Marcus was the problem. Or perhaps after months of being treated like a confused old woman, I finally understood that showing them what I knew would only teach them to hide things better. So I returned to my bedroom. I did not sleep. The next morning, I came downstairs at 6 earlier than usual. The kitchen table had been cleared. The folder was gone, and Daniel's laptop was closed beside his chair. Melissa entered wearing her robe and smiled when she saw me. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep." "You should have taken the medication Dr. Lawson gave you." "I don't need medication every time I have a restless night." Her smile tightened. "I'm only trying to help." That sentence had become her shield. She used it whenever she opened my mail, questioned my spending, or made decisions about my house without asking. I poured myself coffee and watched her carefully. Why was Carol here so late? Melissa paused for less than a second. She was worried about the neighbor. At midnight, Daniel found something strange in the property records. What did he find? She turned away and opened the refrigerator. I don't know. You'd have to ask him. It was a lie. I knew it immediately. Melissa had never been good at lying as a child. Her voice became overly casual, and she found a reason not to look at me. At 43, those habits had not changed. I decided not to confront her. Instead, after breakfast, I told the family I was going to the library for my volunteer shift. I drove downtown, parked behind the brick municipal building, and entered through the side doors. But I did not go directly to the library. I crossed the lobby to the county records office. Robert had handled most of our legal and financial matters while he was alive. He believed both spouses should understand everything, but I had always trusted him. After his death, Melissa and Daniel offered to manage the paperwork. Standing at the records counter that morning, I regretted every document I had signed without reading closely. A clerk named Susan helped me search the public property database. I began with Marcus's house. The records showed that he had purchased it through a private sale 3 weeks before moving in. There was nothing unusual about the transaction. No liens disputes or legal claims. Then I searched my own address. At first, everything looked normal. Robert and I were listed as the longtime owners with his death certificate recorded the previous spring. The property had passed fully to me, but beneath that entry was a recently filed notice. It was not a transfer of ownership. It was an application requesting an assessment related to future estate management. The language was complicated, but 2 names stood out. Melissa Parker Whitmore, Daniel Whitmore. They had submitted paperwork claiming they were assisting an elderly relative who might soon be unable to manage her property independently. My hands turned cold. Does this mean they own part of my house? I asked. Susan shook her head. Not based on what I can see, but it may be connected to a petition for guardianship or financial authority. You should speak with an attorney. I never agreed to any guardianship. Then I would speak with someone quickly. She printed the record for me. I folded it into my purse and thanked her, although my voice barely worked. On the way out, I noticed another document attached to the filing. It referenced a boundary review between my property and Marcus's. According to the description, Daniel had questioned whether a narrow strip of Marcus's backyard actually belonged to my parcel. That explained his obsession with the property line, but it did not explain why they needed Marcus to look dangerous. I drove home slowly rehearsing what I might say. By the time I reached our street, another police car was parked outside Marcus's house. The second call. An officer stood beside Marcus near the front porch. Daniel watched from our driveway with his arms crossed. I pulled over and hurried toward him. What happened? Daniel looked annoyed to see me. There was shouting. From Marcus. From inside his house. At that moment, Marcus's front door opened and an elderly black woman stepped onto the porch. She leaned on a cane, her silver hair wrapped in a patterned scarf. Marcus helped her down the step. The supposed shouting had come from his mother, who was hard of hearing, and had been calling to him from another room. The officer apologized before leaving. Marcus looked toward us. His face showed no anger, but the disappointment in his eyes made me feel ashamed. "Did you call again?" I asked Daniel. I heard yelling. "You saw an elderly woman enter that house this morning. I didn't know who she was. You could have walked over and asked." His expression hardened. "I'm not going onto that man's property. That man has a name." Daniel stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You need to stop defending strangers over your own family." The sentence struck me harder than I expected. Marcus was a stranger, yes, but he had shown me more courtesy in 1 week than Daniel had shown me in months. I walked across the lawn before I lost my nerve. Marcus's mother had already gone inside. Marcus remained on the porch. "I'm sorry," I said. He studied me quietly. "Was it your daughter this time?" "My son-in-law?" Marcus nodded as though confirming something he already suspected. "I don't want trouble," he said. "I moved here because I thought this neighborhood would be peaceful." "I know. Do you?" The question was not cruel. That made it more painful. I reached into my purse and touched the folded property record. "There may be something happening that I don't understand yet." His expression changed slightly. "What kind of something?" I glanced back at my house. Daniel was still watching us. "I can't explain now." Marcus followed my gaze. "Mrs. Parker, if someone is pressuring you or making decisions without your permission, you should speak to someone you trust." His words made my throat tighten. I almost showed him the document, but fear stopped me. I still did not know who Marcus was, what he knew, or why my family seemed so concerned about him. "I'll handle it," I said. He looked unconvinced. That afternoon, I called a lawyer named Evelyn Brooks, whom I knew from the library board. I told her I needed advice about property documents and asked if we could meet privately. She scheduled me for the following morning. I hid the printed record inside an old sewing basket in my closet. At dinner, Daniel barely spoke to me. Melissa kept asking whether I felt tired or confused. Carol called twice to remind me that grief could affect memory. Their concern no longer sounded loving. It sounded rehearsed. The third police call came the next day before I could reach Evelyn's office. Melissa reported that Marcus had threatened Daniel near the fence. I had witnessed the entire exchange from my bedroom window. Marcus had calmly asked Daniel to remove a survey marker Daniel had placed in his yard. There had been no threat. But when the officers arrived, Melissa cried. Daniel claimed Marcus had stepped toward him aggressively. Carol appeared moments later and said she had always believed Marcus was dangerous. 3 relatives, 1 story, and Marcus standing alone. An officer asked whether anyone else had seen what happened. I stepped onto the porch. Melissa looked at me with pleading eyes. Daniel's jaw tightened. Carol shook her head almost imperceptibly. They expected me to protect the family. Instead, I said, I saw everything. Marcus never threatened anyone. The silence that followed felt like the moment before glass breaks. The officers left after ordering Daniel to remove the marker. Marcus thanked me with a quiet nod. My family said nothing until we were back inside. Then Melissa locked the front door, turned toward me, and asked a question that revealed far more than she intended. Have you been looking at the property records? Melissa's question hung between us. Have you been looking at the property records? I studied my daughter's face. She was trying to sound casual, but fear had tightened the muscles around her mouth. Why would that concern you? I asked. Daniel moved away from the window. It doesn't concern us, he said. We're concerned about you. There it was again. Concern. The word they used whenever they wanted to control the conversation. Carol placed her purse on the kitchen counter and gave me the soft, sorrowful expression she had perfected since Robert's funeral. Margaret, no one is attacking you, she said. We only want to make sure you don't misunderstand complicated documents. I understand my own name. Melissa's eyes narrowed. What exactly did you see? I could have told them about the application. I could have demanded to know why they had described me as someone who might soon be unable to manage her affairs. Instead, I forced myself to shrug. Nothing important. I was curious about the boundary dispute. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. It isn't a dispute, he said. The new neighbor may be using land that belongs to this property. Did you have the land surveyed? I'm looking into it. Then why did you put a marker in his yard? His face hardened again. I was identifying the old boundary. You were trespassing. Melissa stepped between us. Mom, please. Daniel is trying to protect what will eventually belong to the family. The words hit me with surprising force. What will eventually belong to the family? She blinked. You know what I mean. No, I don't. This house, your savings, everything Dad built, your father and I built it together. Of course you did. And I am still alive. No one answered. The silence was more honest than anything they had said. I looked at my daughter, my son-in-law, and my sister. 3 people who claimed to love me, all standing inside my home as though they were waiting for me to disappear. I have an appointment, I said. With whom? Melissa asked immediately. A friend. I'll drive you. That won't be necessary. Daniel reached for his keys. At least let me take you. Your hands are shaking. I looked down. They were shaking, but not because I was confused. I was furious. I can drive myself. Melissa followed me into the hallway. Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I turned toward her. For whom? She had no answer. I drove straight to Evelyn Brooks' office. Evelyn was 63 with silver-streaked hair, sharp blue eyes, and the kind of calm voice that made people stop interrupting. We had served together on the library fundraising committee for 5 years, but I had never needed her professional help before. She closed the door, poured me a glass of water, and read the document I had brought from the county office. Her expression changed before she reached the second page. Did you authorize Melissa or Daniel to begin a competency assessment? No. Did you sign a durable power of attorney after Robert died? I signed several papers. Melissa said they were related to insurance and probate. Do you have copies? They kept the folder. Evelyn removed her glasses. Margaret, I don't want to frighten you, but this is serious. My stomach tightened. How serious? This filing suggests they may be preparing to petition the court for control over your financial and property decisions. The application alone does not give them that authority, but it creates a record. If they produce medical statements, witness testimony, or evidence that you are behaving irrationally, they could argue that intervention is necessary. I thought of Melissa asking whether I felt confused. Carol reminding me that grief affected memory. Daniel pointing out my shaking hands. They had not merely been insensitive, they had been collecting evidence. What does Marcus have to do with it? I asked. Evelyn looked at the boundary notice again. Possibly nothing. But if your family claims you are defending a dangerous stranger against their advice, they may try to present that as poor judgment. The room seemed to tilt. The police calls. What police calls? I told her everything. The suspicious vehicle, the supposed shouting, the invented threat, and the conversation I had overheard at midnight. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back slowly. Write down every incident, dates, times, who called, what was alleged, and what actually happened. Will that help Marcus? It may help both of you. She opened a legal pad and began making notes. Then she asked a question I had been avoiding. Do you believe your family is trying to take your house? I looked out her window at the courthouse across the street. I believe they have already decided it belongs to them. Evelyn reached across the desk and placed her hand over mine. Then we make sure they are wrong. For the first time since Robert died, I felt that someone was speaking to me as an adult rather than a problem to be managed. Evelyn arranged for a title review, requested copies of every recent filing connected to my property, and advised me to move my financial records to a secure location. She also told me not to confront my family yet. If they realize you have legal counsel, they may destroy evidence or accelerate their plan. Should I leave the house? Not unless you feel physically unsafe. It is your home. But change the passwords on your accounts, secure your identification, and do not sign anything. Before I left, she gave me the number of a private mobile notary who could help me revoke any authority I might have unknowingly granted. I returned home shortly after noon. The front door was unlocked. Inside, I found Melissa standing in my bedroom. The sewing basket was open on the bed. The county record lay in her hand. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she lifted the paper. "You lied to me?" I closed the bedroom door behind me. "You searched my room. I was putting away laundry. My laundry was already put away." Melissa's face flushed. "Why are you investigating us? Why are you filing papers about my mental capacity?" Her expression changed instantly. The anger disappeared, replaced by wounded concern. "Mom, it isn't what you think." "Then explain it." "We were only preparing for an emergency." "What emergency?" "You live alone." "I haven't lived alone for months because you moved into my house." "Exactly. We gave up our apartment to take care of you. I never asked you to give it up." Her eyes filled with tears so quickly that I wondered whether they were real. "After everything I've done, you're treating me like a criminal. I asked you a question, and I'm telling you that we were trying to protect you. By telling the county, I may be incompetent." Her voice dropped. "You have not been yourself since Dad died." Pain flashed through me sharp and deep. She knew how to use Robert's death as a weapon. What have I done that proves I cannot manage my life? "You forget things. Everyone forgets things. You gave money to that library fundraiser twice. I made 2 separate donations. You let a stranger come to the door and give you food. He is our neighbor. You defended him against your own family." There it was. Not memory, not health. Obedience. To Melissa, refusing to follow them was proof that something was wrong with me. Before I could answer, sirens sounded outside. We both turned toward the window. 2 police cars stopped in front of Marcus's home. The 4th call. Daniel stood near the sidewalk, speaking to an officer. Carol was beside him. Marcus emerged from his garage with his hands visible. His expression remained controlled, but I could see the exhaustion in the way he held his shoulders. "What did they report this time?" I demanded. Melissa folded the document. Daniel saw him carrying a gun. My heart stopped. Through the window, I saw an officer approach Marcus cautiously. Then Marcus pointed toward the open garage. Inside, resting on a workbench, was not a gun. It was a black cordless drill. I turned toward Melissa. "You knew it was a tool. I didn't make the call, but you knew." She looked away. Outside, Marcus spoke briefly with the officers. One of them examined the drill, then turned toward Daniel with visible irritation. The officers left without entering the house. Marcus remained in his driveway. Then he looked directly at my bedroom window. This time, he did not look disappointed. He looked as though he had finally made a decision. Less than an hour later, an envelope appeared beneath my front door. Inside was a single handwritten sentence. "Mrs. Parker, your family is not only trying to take your property, they are using my past to do it." Beneath the message was a time and place: tomorrow, 10 in the morning, and one final warning. Do not tell them you are meeting me. The next morning, I left the house at 9:30 with my library tote bag over my shoulder. Melissa was in the kitchen scrolling through her phone. Daniel had already left, though he had not said where he was going. Carol had called twice before breakfast, asking whether I had slept well and whether I remembered taking my vitamins. Their questions no longer sounded innocent. "I'm going to the library," I said. Melissa looked up immediately. "You don't volunteer on Wednesdays." "I need to return some books." "I can do that for you. I would like to do it myself." She stared at me for a moment, searching my face for something. Fear, perhaps. Confusion? Guilt? Whatever she hoped to find, I refused to give it to her. "Don't be gone long," she said. It was not a request. The address Marcus had written belonged to a small diner near the courthouse. Robert and I used to eat breakfast there after his cardiology appointments. The booths were covered in faded red vinyl, and the waitress still called everyone honey. Marcus was seated in the back corner when I arrived. He stood as I approached, then glanced toward the windows before gesturing for me to sit. "You came alone?" "Yes. Did they follow you?" "I don't think so." His expression told me he was not reassured. A sealed folder rested on the table between us. For the first time, I noticed how carefully Marcus watched the room. His back was against the wall. He could see both entrances. Every time the bell over the door rang, his eyes moved toward it. "You said my family was using your past," I began. "What did you mean?" Marcus folded his hands. "Before I explain, I need to tell you who I am." I waited. My full name is Marcus Reed. For 32 years, I worked in law enforcement. My first thought was of the framed photograph I had seen through his doorway. What kind of law enforcement? I started as a patrol officer in Cleveland. I became a detective, then captain. For the last 7 years, I served as deputy chief. I stared at him. "You were a deputy police chief?" "Yes." "Why didn't you say that when you moved in?" "Because I wanted 1 month of peace before my new appointment became public." My pulse quickened. "What appointment?" Marcus looked directly at me. "Next Monday, the city council is expected to confirm me as the new chief of police." For several seconds, I could only hear the clatter of dishes behind the counter. My family had called the police on the incoming police chief 4 times. The absurdity should have made me laugh. Instead, it made me afraid. Do they know I asked? Daniel does. How Marcus opened the folder. The first page was a printed photograph from a local government website. It showed Marcus shaking hands with the mayor during a private committee meeting. The caption identified him as the final candidate for police chief. The announcement was supposed to remain confidential until the background review was complete, Marcus said. But someone accessed the city's internal planning documents. Daniel, I can't prove he was the one who accessed them, but I can prove he searched my name before the first police call. He slid another page across the table. It was a screenshot of an online search history connected to an email address I recognized. Daniel's. My mouth went dry. How did you get this? The fourth call crossed a line. Reporting a cordless drill as a firearm could have gotten me killed. I asked the responding officers to preserve the full complaint records. One of them recognized me from the selection process and informed the deputy mayor. Marcus's jaw tightened. I did not want special treatment, but I was no longer willing to pretend these were misunderstandings. He turned to another document. It was a copy of an old newspaper article. The headline described a disciplinary investigation from 8 years earlier. Marcus had been accused of using excessive force during an arrest. The article included a photograph of him outside a courthouse. Was it true? I asked quietly. No. His answer came without hesitation. The man I arrested had assaulted an elderly woman and stolen the deed to her home. During the arrest, he injured himself trying to escape through a window. His lawyer accused me of beating him. What happened? Security footage cleared me. The department reinstated me, and the man was convicted of elder fraud. Marcus pointed to the article. But if someone only reads the headline, I look dangerous. I understood before he said anything else. That is what my family found. Yes. Daniel printed copies. He gave one to your sister. A wave of nausea moved through me. Why would they care about an old article? Because the case involved property fraud against an elderly widow. The words settled heavily between us. Marcus opened the folder to a page filled with property maps and financial records. When I bought the house next to yours, my attorney discovered an unusual filing involving the shared boundary. Daniel had submitted a claim suggesting your property extended 6 feet into my backyard. He told me it was an old boundary? It isn't. The survey is clear. But that was not the real problem. Marcus placed his finger on a signature at the bottom of the page. My name, Margaret Parker. I stared at it. That is not my signature. I didn't think it was. The room seemed suddenly too warm. What did I supposedly sign a statement authorizing Daniel to negotiate a property settlement on your behalf. I never authorized him. If his claim had succeeded, he could have demanded compensation from me or pressured me to sell part of the property. But why would he want 6 feet of land? He didn't. Marcus leaned closer. The false boundary claim created a legal connection between our properties. It gave Daniel a reason to access records request appraisals and argue that your home required professional management. I thought of the competency filing. He is building a case that I cannot manage my own property. Yes. And the police calls, they serve 2 purposes. First, they create a record that the neighborhood is unsafe. Daniel could argue that you are vulnerable and need someone else controlling the home, and the second, Marcus's face became grim. They are trying to provoke me. I felt a chill despite the warm diner. Into doing what? Losing my temper? Threatening Daniel? Touching him? Anything they can photograph or report. The argument near the fence returned to me. Daniel had stepped closer to Marcus than necessary. He had raised his voice while Marcus remained calm. He wanted Marcus to hit him, I whispered to myself. Yes, Marcus's voice softened. If I reacted badly, Daniel could use my old accusation to make me look violent. My appointment as chief would collapse, and your family could claim you were irrational for trusting me. The entire plan was beginning to take shape. It was cruel, but it was also patient. Melissa's constant questions about my memory, Carol's warnings, Daniel's false documents, the calls to police. Every act created another small piece of evidence. Why does Daniel need my house so badly? I asked. Marcus hesitated. That is the part I cannot fully prove yet. He removed one final document. It was a financial lien associated with a construction company called Whitmore Development, Daniel's business. The amount owed was nearly $600,000. I covered my mouth. His company is failing. It appears so. He told us business was excellent. Public records say otherwise. He is facing lawsuits from 2 subcontractors and a bank. I remembered Daniel talking about purchasing the house next door. He had called it an investment for the family. It had never been about family. He needed property, collateral, money. Marcus closed the folder. Mrs. Parker. I believe Daniel intends to gain control of your home, borrow against it, and use the money to save his company. And Melissa. I don't know how much she understands. I wanted to defend my daughter. The instinct rose, automatically born from 43 years of loving her. Then I remembered her standing in my bedroom with the stolen document in her hand. She understood enough. What should I do? I asked. Work with your attorney. Secure your accounts. Document everything. Why are you helping me? Marcus was silent for a moment. My mother's sister lost her house to her own son. By the time anyone believed her, the property had been sold. Pain passed through his eyes. I joined the financial crimes unit because of her. When I recognized the signs around your home, I could not ignore them. Tears filled my eyes. A man my family had treated like a criminal was trying to protect me from my own child. Before I could respond, the bell over the diner door rang. Marcus's eyes moved toward the entrance. His entire body went still. I followed his gaze. Carol had just walked inside. She spotted us immediately. For one terrible second, no one moved. Then her eyes dropped to the folder on the table. Her face lost all color. She turned and rushed back outside. Marcus reached for his phone. You need to call your attorney now. Why? Because your family knows we've spoken. My phone began ringing inside my purse. Melissa's name appeared on the screen. Then a text message arrived beneath it. Come home now. We need to talk about your condition. I looked at Marcus. He looked at the message. Neither of us said what we were both thinking. They were no longer preparing their plan. They were putting it into action. I did not answer Melissa's call. Instead, I handed my phone to Marcus and asked him to photograph the message. Then I called Evelyn. She listened carefully as I explained that Carol had seen us together and that Melissa was demanding I return home to discuss my condition. Do not go back alone, Evelyn said. Come directly to my office. Marcus offered to drive me, but I knew that arriving with him would give my family another story to twist. I thanked him, placed the copies he had shown me inside my library tote, and drove myself across town. Evelyn was waiting in the lobby. Within an hour, she had helped me sign documents revoking any financial authority Melissa or Daniel might claim. She contacted my bank, placed additional security on my accounts, and prepared a formal notice stating that I remained mentally competent and had retained independent counsel. Then she called my physician. Dr. Lawson confirmed that he had never diagnosed me with dementia cognitive decline or any condition that prevented me from managing my affairs. He sounded confused when Evelyn asked whether he had recommended guardianship. No, he said through the speakerphone. Margaret is grieving, but grief is not incompetence. That sentence nearly made me cry. My family had taken ordinary sorrow and tried to turn it into a legal weapon. Evelyn arranged for a licensed evaluator to examine me independently the next afternoon. She also advised me to record any conversation in which Daniel or Melissa pressured me about money or property, provided I was physically present and complying with state law. By the time we finished, 3 hours had passed. I had 22 missed calls, 11 from Melissa, 7 from Carol, 4 from Daniel. The final voicemail came from my daughter. Mom, you are frightening everyone. Carol saw you secretly meeting that man. Daniel believes he may be manipulating you. Please come home before we are forced to involve professionals. Professionals. The word felt like a threat. Evelyn insisted on following me home in her own car. She parked across the street while I entered through the front door. Everyone was waiting in the living room. Daniel stood near the fireplace. Carol sat stiffly on the sofa. Melissa paced beside the coffee table. The moment I entered, she rushed toward me. Where have you been meeting with my lawyer? The room changed. Daniel's expression darkened. Carol looked at Melissa. Melissa stopped moving. Your lawyer, she repeated. Yes. Why would you need a lawyer to protect myself? From whom I placed my handbag on the table? You tell me. Daniel spoke before Melissa could answer. That neighbor is filling your head with lies. Marcus showed me public records. He invaded our privacy. Your company owes nearly $600,000. Daniel's face became rigid. That has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me if you plan to borrow against my house. Melissa stared at him. What is she talking about? For the first time, I saw genuine confusion in my daughter's eyes. Daniel recovered quickly. She doesn't understand business filings. I understand a forged signature. I removed a copy of the boundary authorization from my bag and placed it on the table. My name is on this document. I did not sign it. Melissa picked it up. Her eyes moved rapidly across the page. Daniel? It was preliminary paperwork. Did Mom sign this? She authorized me verbally. I did not. Daniel turned on me. You told me to protect the property. I told you no such thing. Carol rose from the sofa. This is becoming hysterical. No, I said. It is becoming clear. Carol's face tightened. You are trusting a stranger who has already been investigated for violence. He was cleared. That is what he told you. That is what the official record says. Melissa looked between us, breathing quickly. Mom, please sit down. I am not tired. No one said you were. You were about to. Her mouth closed. I took out my phone and placed it face down on the coffee table. The recorder was already running. I want each of you to explain why you filed papers suggesting I cannot manage my own affairs. Daniel folded his arms. We were preparing for the future. My future or yours. You are 71 years old, and you are 46. Neither fact gives you ownership of my home. Carol stepped closer. Margaret, listen to yourself. You are accusing your daughter of stealing from you because a man you barely know showed you some papers. A lawyer reviewed those papers. Daniel's confidence slipped for half a second. Which lawyer? That is none of your concern. It becomes our concern when someone is exploiting you. I almost laughed. The hypocrisy was so complete that it felt unreal. Then, pounding sounded at the front door. Daniel smiled. I called someone who can help. A woman in a gray suit stood outside with a leather case. She introduced herself as a social worker, responding to a report that an elderly homeowner might be under the influence of a potentially dangerous neighbor. The fifth call had not gone to the police. It had gone to Adult Protective Services. Melissa looked startled. You called them? Daniel ignored her. The social worker asked to speak with me privately. I agreed and led her into the dining room, where Evelyn joined us after crossing the street. For 40 minutes, I answered questions about my health finances, daily routine, and relationship with Marcus. I showed her the forged signature, the county filing, and Dr. Lawson's written statement that Evelyn had obtained. The social worker's expression grew increasingly serious. When she finished, she asked to speak with Daniel and Melissa separately. Daniel refused. This is ridiculous, he said. We called because she needs help. The social worker looked directly at him. Mr. Whitmore, based on what I have seen, your mother-in-law may indeed need protection, but not from the person you reported. Daniel's face turned red. She gave me her card and promised to document the visit. Before leaving, she warned my family that interfering with my legal or financial decisions could lead to further investigation. After the door closed, no one spoke. Then Daniel pointed at me. You have embarrassed this family. No, I said quietly. I have stopped protecting its secrets. He stepped forward so quickly that Melissa moved between us. Daniel, stop. He stared at her. Something passed between them. Fear, anger, and perhaps the first crack in their alliance. That evening, Carol left without saying goodbye. Daniel locked himself in the guest room with his laptop. Melissa sat alone at the kitchen table reading the copied financial lien again and again. Near midnight, I heard her whisper through the closed door. How much trouble are we really in? Daniel answered too softly for me to hear. Then my phone vibrated. Marcus had sent me a single message. Your family made another report. Carol claims I followed her from the diner and threatened her. The sixth accusation had already begun. And this time, they had chosen a lie that could destroy his career before it even started. Ket Thuk Fan Sao. Fan Bay. The next morning, 2 detectives arrived at Marcus's house. I watched from behind my bedroom curtain as they entered carrying notebooks. Daniel stood in our driveway pretending to wash his truck, though the hose remained motionless in his hand. Carol had told the police that Marcus followed her from the diner, blocked her car near an intersection, and warned her to stay away from me. It was a complete invention. Fortunately, the diner's parking lot had security cameras. So did the pharmacy across the street, where Carol claimed Marcus had confronted her. The recordings showed Marcus leaving the diner 15 minutes after Carol. He drove east toward City Hall. Carol drove west. Their vehicles never crossed paths. The accusation collapsed within hours, but the damage had already begun. A local community website published a vague post saying the incoming police chief was connected to a harassment complaint involving an elderly woman. It did not mention that the complaint had been disproved. By lunchtime, people were sharing the story. Daniel read the post aloud at the kitchen counter. Looks like your friend has problems of his own. He has problems because your family keeps lying about him. Melissa sat across from him, pale and exhausted. She had barely spoken since learning about the debt. Did you know Carol's story wasn't true? I asked her. No. Daniel answered for her. We believe Carol. There is video proving she lied. She may have confused the location. Yesterday you said confusion made me incompetent. His eyes narrowed. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. A process server handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a petition for emergency guardianship. Melissa and Daniel claimed that I was suffering from severe grief-related cognitive decline. According to the filing, I had become paranoid hostile, financially reckless, and dangerously attached to a man with a violent history. They requested temporary authority over my finances, medical care, and home. My daughter's signature appeared at the bottom. I looked at her across the room. You signed this? Melissa rose slowly. Mom, I can explain. You asked a court to take away my rights. Daniel said it was temporary. Daniel stepped between us. We had no choice. You hired a lawyer and started making accusations. So, you punished me for protecting myself? We are trying to stop Marcus from taking advantage of you. Marcus has never asked me for a dime. That doesn't mean he won't. I looked at Melissa again. Did you read everything before you signed? Her silence was my answer. I carried the petition to my bedroom and called Evelyn. She was furious, though she controlled her voice. The court scheduled an emergency hearing for Friday morning, she said. They are moving quickly because Daniel claims you may transfer property to Marcus. I would never do that. I know. We will show the judge. The independent evaluator arrived that afternoon. Dr. Hannah Pierce spent nearly 3 hours with me. She tested my memory, reasoning, financial awareness, and ability to understand legal decisions. I remembered every word she asked me to recall. I balanced a sample account. I explained my medical history and described the property dispute in detail. At the end, she closed her notebook. Mrs. Parker, you are grieving. You are under severe stress, but I see no evidence that you lack capacity. Relief washed through me. Will you put that in writing? I will send my report to your attorney tonight. While she was leaving, a patrol car stopped outside Marcus's home. The 7th police call. Daniel claimed Marcus had been photographing our house. I went outside before the officer even reached his porch. Marcus stood beside his mailbox, holding a phone. May I see the photograph? The officer asked. Marcus turned the screen around. It showed a broken streetlight leaning over the sidewalk. He had taken the picture to report it to Public Works. Daniel insisted that our windows were visible in the background. So is every other house on the block, I said. The officer's patience wore thin. Mr. Whitmore repeated misuse of emergency services can result in charges. Daniel pointed toward Marcus. He is watching us. Marcus remained calm. I photographed city property from a public sidewalk. The officer dismissed the complaint and left. Several neighbors had gathered outside. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street approached me quietly. Margaret, is everything all right? No, I said, but I am trying to make it right. She looked toward Daniel. My doorbell camera recorded him walking over to Mr. Reed's driveway last night. He stood there for almost 10 minutes. What time? A little after 11. I asked her to save the footage. That night, she sent it to me. The video showed Daniel placing something beside Marcus's garage. At dawn, before Marcus came outside, Daniel returned and removed it. I could not tell what the object was, but Evelyn said the footage proved he had entered Marcus's property while claiming to fear him. She forwarded the recording to the detective reviewing Carol's false complaint. On Thursday evening, I entered Robert's study for the first time since his death. Melissa had used the room for storing boxes, but Robert's desk remained untouched. I opened the bottom drawer and found an old accordion file containing tax returns, insurance papers, and handwritten notes. One note was dated 2 months before Robert died. Daniel asked again about borrowing against the house. I told him no. He became angry. Margaret must never be pressured into risking her home for his company. I read it 3 times. Robert had known. He had protected me while he was alive, and he had left behind the truth in his careful handwriting. Beneath the note was a copy of our original estate plan. The house was mine alone after Robert's death. If I chose to sell it, the decision belonged entirely to me. There was also a letter addressed to Melissa. I did not open it. Instead, I placed everything inside a locked case and took it to Evelyn's office. The guardianship hearing began Friday morning. Melissa sat beside Daniel at the petitioner's table. Carol sat behind them, wearing black as though attending a funeral. Evelyn presented Dr. Pierce's evaluation. Dr. Lawson's statement, the forged authorization, Robert's note, and the Adult Protective Services report. Daniel's lawyer argued that my sudden friendship with Marcus proved impaired judgment. The judge removed her glasses. Is friendship with a neighbor now considered evidence of incapacity? Daniel's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. No, Your Honor. But this particular neighbor has a concerning history. Evelyn placed Marcus's official clearance record before the court. The judge read it silently. Then she denied the emergency guardianship petition. She also ordered that neither Melissa nor Daniel could access my financial accounts or sign property documents on my behalf. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I looked at my daughter. Melissa was crying, not because she had lost control of my money, because she had finally realized Daniel might lose everything. Outside the courthouse, she grabbed my arm. Mom, please. If his business collapses, we could lose our home. I pulled free. You were willing to make me lose mine. She covered her face. Daniel walked past us without stopping. As he reached the parking lot, his phone rang. He answered, listened, and turned toward Marcus, who stood near the courthouse steps. The hatred in Daniel's face frightened me. Later that afternoon, Marcus received an anonymous envelope at City Hall. Inside was a photograph of him helping his elderly mother into her car. Across the image, someone had written, "Leave the neighborhood before Monday, or she becomes part of the story." Kethuk Fan Bay. Fan Tam. Marcus did not tell his mother about the threat. He told the police. A protective detail began checking his house several times a day, though he refused to allow officers to remain visibly stationed outside. He said he would not give my family the satisfaction of making the neighborhood feel like a battlefield. I admired his restraint. I also feared it would cost him. By then, 8 days had passed since the first call. 7 formal reports had been made against him, and each one had proven false or exaggerated. Still, Daniel would not stop. On Saturday morning, the 8th call accused Marcus of playing threatening music directed at our house. The threatening music was gospel, coming from a small radio while Marcus washed his car. An officer arrived, listened for less than a minute, and left after warning Daniel again about false complaints. That afternoon, the 9th call claimed a strange man was trying to enter Marcus's back door. The man was a locksmith Marcus had hired to replace the locks after the anonymous threat. Daniel knew that because he had watched the marked locksmith van arrive. When police questioned him, he said he was only trying to protect the neighborhood. The phrase made me sick. On Sunday, the 10th call came from Carol. She reported that Marcus's mother had wandered into the street and appeared neglected. I was sitting on Marcus's porch when the officer arrived. His mother, Lillian, sat beside me drinking iced tea and telling stories about raising 3 sons while working nights as a nurse. She had not wandered anywhere. Carol had seen her walk to the mailbox with a cane. Lillian looked at the officer and sighed. I spent 40 years caring for frightened people in an emergency room, she said. I never thought growing old while black would make someone call the police because I checked my own mail. Shame burned through me. Although I had never made the calls, they came from my house and my family. I am sorry, I told her after the officer left. Lillian patted my hand. Do not apologize for what other people choose to do. Decide what you choose to do next. Her words stayed with me. Monday morning, Marcus was officially confirmed as the new chief of police. The announcement appeared on television at 10 o'clock. His photograph filled the screen beneath the words, "New leadership for city police." Melissa stood frozen in the kitchen. Carol, who had arrived minutes earlier, sat down without taking off her coat. Daniel turned off the television. So that's his game, he said. What game? I demanded. He moved next door knowing he would become chief. He bought a house. He did not force you to call the police 10 times. He hid who he was. A private citizen does not owe you his resume. Melissa whispered. We called the police on the police chief. No. Daniel snapped. We reported suspicious behavior. His job does not make him innocent. I looked at my daughter. For the first time, she looked afraid of her husband, not worried about him. Afraid of him. Marcus's confirmation changed the public mood immediately. Reporters began asking why the incoming chief had been the subject of repeated calls from one neighboring household. The city released a brief statement confirming that none of the reports had resulted in charges. A journalist named Rebecca Sloan contacted me. I refused an interview. This was not because I wanted to protect Daniel anymore. It was because Evelyn believed public comments could complicate the fraud investigation. Yes, there was now an investigation. The detective reviewing Carol's complaint had connected the forged property authorization, the false guardianship petition, and Daniel's financial problems. Adult Protective Services had referred the matter to the district attorney's elder exploitation unit. Daniel did not know how much evidence they had. Neither did Melissa. That evening, I found her sitting alone on the back steps. She had been crying. "Did you know about the forged signature?" I asked. "No." "Did you know Daniel wanted to borrow against my house?" "He said you had agreed to help us eventually." "I never agreed." She stared at the grass. "He told me Dad promised. Your father wrote the opposite." I showed her a photograph of Robert's note. Melissa read it slowly. Her lips trembled. "Why would Daniel lie about Dad? Because your father is not here to defend himself." The truth seemed to break something inside her. She told me Daniel's construction company had been losing money for almost 2 years. He had hidden lawsuits, unpaid taxes, and a second mortgage on their home. When she discovered part of the debt, he promised he had a plan. He said the property next door could solve everything, she whispered. How? He wanted to buy it cheaply, combine the lots, and sell both homes to a developer. He said you could live with us. My chest tightened. He planned to sell my home. He said it would be better for everyone. Did you agree? Melissa covered her face. I didn't say no. That answer hurt more than any lie. She had pictured my home sold, my life packed into boxes, and me living under her supervision while Daniel used Robert's legacy to pay his debts. Why did you sign the guardianship petition? Daniel said Marcus was manipulating you. He showed me the old article. He said if we did not act quickly, Marcus might convince you to change your will. Did you ever ask me? She shook her head. You decided I could not be trusted because I would not give you what you wanted. I was scared. So was I. We sat in silence. Then Melissa said something that changed the direction of everything. The calls were not only about making Marcus look dangerous. I turned toward her. What else were they for? Daniel wanted the police reports to lower the value of both properties. I stared at her. He said documented disturbances would scare away buyers. Then, one of his business partners could make a low offer through another company. The scheme was larger than I had imagined. Daniel planned to damage Marcus's reputation, reduce property values, take control of my house, and sell both parcels through a hidden buyer. Who is the business partner? I don't know his full name. Daniel calls him Vic. Do you have proof? She hesitated. There are emails on Daniel's laptop. Can you access them? I know his password. I took her hand. If you truly want to make this right, save those emails and give them to Evelyn. Melissa nodded, but fear filled her face. What happens to Daniel? That depends on what he has done. He is my husband, and I am your mother. She began crying again. This time, I did not comfort her immediately. Love did not require me to erase the consequences of her choices. That night, Melissa copied dozens of emails onto a flash drive. They showed Daniel discussing a pressure campaign, a competency route, and a plan to create enough police activity to make Marcus's house appear connected to neighborhood danger. The anonymous threat against Lillian was mentioned too. One email said, "The old mother gives us leverage. Reed will back down if his family is pulled in." Melissa read the sentence and nearly collapsed. At 2 a.m, we heard Daniel's truck enter the driveway. Melissa hid the flash drive inside the lining of my handbag. Daniel walked into the kitchen, carrying a bottle of whiskey. He looked at us sitting together. Then his eyes moved to the open laptop. "What have you been doing?" he asked. Melissa closed the screen. "Nothing." Daniel smiled. It was not a friendly smile. He walked upstairs without another word. 10 minutes later, the power in the house went out. Then came the sound of glass breaking next door. Ket thuk fan tam. Fan Chin. Melissa and I rushed to the front window. Marcus's porch light was dark, but the street lamp revealed broken glass across his driveway. A brick had been thrown through the side window of his SUV. Daniel stood behind us. "What happened?" he asked. His voice sounded too calm. "You know what happened," Melissa said. He looked at her sharply. "What is that supposed to mean?" Before she could answer, Marcus stepped outside holding a flashlight. He examined the damage, then called the police himself. For the first time, the call was legitimate. Officers arrived within minutes. One photographed the broken window, while another searched the street. Mrs. Alvarez came outside in her robe. "My camera may have caught something," she said. Daniel's face changed, only slightly. But I saw it. The doorbell footage showed a hooded figure leaving our side yard, crossing the narrow strip between the properties and throwing the brick. The person's face was hidden. The shoes were not. They were tan work boots with a dark stain across the left toe. I had seen those boots beside our garage door every day. Daniel was wearing slippers when police questioned him, but the boots were gone. He claimed he had thrown them away earlier that week. The officers searched our outdoor trash bins and found nothing. They did not arrest him that night, but the lead detective asked Daniel to come to the station for a formal interview. He refused until he spoke with a lawyer. After the police left, Daniel turned on Melissa. "You gave them something." "No. Do not lie to me. She does not have to answer you," I said. He pointed toward the stairs. "This is between my wife and me, not in my house." His face twisted. "Your house, your money, your rules. That is all you care about. I cared for this family for more than 40 years. And what do we get for it?" The question revealed everything. Not love, not gratitude, an expected payment. "You get what belongs to you," I said, nothing more. He took one step toward me. Melissa moved in front of him. "Stop, Daniel." He stared at her, breathing heavily. Then he went upstairs and slammed the door. The next morning, Melissa gave Evelyn the flash drive. The emails connected Daniel to Victor Hale, a real estate investor known for buying distressed properties through shell companies. Victor had agreed to purchase both houses once Daniel gained authority over mine and forced Marcus into selling. The boundary dispute was manufactured to create litigation. The repeated police calls were intended to make Marcus appear dangerous and lower neighborhood values. The guardianship petition was meant to remove my ability to object. Every part of the scheme was documented. What the emails did not prove was who had thrown the brick or written the threat to Lillian. The police obtained a warrant for Daniel's business office. There they found copies of my financial records, photographs of Marcus's home, printed versions of the old disciplinary article, and a draft loan application using my property as collateral. They also found Carol's name beside a payment of $20,000. When detectives questioned her, Carol broke. She came to my home that afternoon with swollen eyes and trembling hands. Daniel said it was only a consulting fee, she told me. For what? For helping you understand that living alone was unsafe. You lied to the police. He said no one would be hurt. Marcus could have been shot because you reported him as dangerous? She began sobbing. I did not think it would go that far, but you took the money. I needed it. Carol's husband had left her with credit card debt before he died. She had hidden the problem for years. Daniel discovered it and offered a solution. All she had to do was support the guardianship petition, reinforce claims about my memory, and make several reports against Marcus. My own sister, I whispered. She reached for me. I stepped back. Some betrayals arrived loudly. Others wore the face of someone who had known you since childhood. Carol agreed to cooperate with investigators. She admitted that the story about Marcus following her was false. She also revealed that Daniel planned one final incident. What kind of incident? I asked. He said he needed proof that Marcus entered this house without permission. My blood ran cold. How would he create that? I don't know. He told me to stay away tonight. Evelyn contacted the detectives immediately. They recommended that I leave the house. I refused. This is my home. Marcus called me personally. Margaret, courage does not mean remaining where someone can harm you. I am tired of being pushed out of my own life. Then, let us protect your right to stay. 2 unmarked police vehicles parked nearby that evening. Officers monitored the street from a distance. Marcus remained inside his home with Lillian. Daniel did not return for dinner. At 9:30, Melissa received a message from him. I need time. Do not call. At 10:15, the 11th report was placed anonymously. The caller claimed Marcus had been seen carrying a weapon toward our backyard. Officers checked the area. Marcus had not left his house. Phone records later traced the call to a prepaid device purchased near Daniel's office. At 11, our back door alarm sounded. Melissa screamed. I turned on the kitchen light and saw a shadow move beyond the glass. The doorknob turned. Police rushed from the side yard. They found Victor Hale crouched near the steps with a set of lockpicks, black gloves, and a small bag containing one of Marcus's business cards. The plan was obvious. Victor intended to break into my home and leave evidence pointing toward Marcus. When officers arrested him, he demanded a lawyer. Daniel's name appeared repeatedly on his phone. By midnight, police had enough evidence to seek an arrest warrant, but Daniel had disappeared. His truck was found abandoned behind an empty construction warehouse. Melissa sat at my kitchen table shaking. He will come back, she whispered. I knew she was right. Daniel had lost his business, his plan, and control over his wife. The only thing he had left was anger. The next afternoon, he called Melissa. She put the phone on speaker while detectives listened from another room. I made mistakes, he said, but your mother and Reed destroyed us. You did this, Melissa replied. I did it for our family. You forged her name. I was going to fix everything. Where are you? He ignored the question. Tell your mother I am coming home tonight. We will settle this privately. The line went dead. Police prepared the house, but hours passed. Daniel did not appear. At 7, I tried to eat dinner with Melissa and Carol. None of us was hungry. Rain struck the windows and thunder rolled over the neighborhood. At 8:40, the lights flickered. Then someone called 911 from inside my home. The dispatcher reported that a woman had whispered that Marcus Reed had entered with a gun. Melissa's phone lay on the table. Mine was in my hand. Carol's was inside her purse. None of us had made the call. A phone was ringing somewhere upstairs. Daniel was already inside the house, and the 12th false report had begun. Kethuk Fan Chin. Fan Mue. The ringing stopped before the police arrived. Melissa stood so quickly that her chair fell backward. Daniel, she called. I grabbed her arm. Do not go upstairs. Carol backed toward the kitchen wall, her face gray. The rain battered the roof. Somewhere above us, a floorboard creaked. Then Daniel appeared at the top of the staircase. His clothes were soaked and mud streaked the knees of his pants. In one hand, he held a prepaid phone. In the other, he carried Robert's old revolver. I had forgotten the gun existed. Robert had purchased it decades earlier and kept it locked inside a cabinet in his study. After his death, I assumed Daniel had helped Melissa turn it over to the police. He had not. Melissa stared at the weapon. Put it down. I am not going to hurt anyone, Daniel said. His voice trembled. Then put it down. I needed them to believe Reed came in here. Carol began crying. You said no one would get hurt. Daniel looked at her with disgust. You ruined everything when you talked. Sirens approached outside. Daniel descended one step. The police think Marcus is armed inside this house. When he comes over, they will see what they expect to see. My stomach turned. You called them to get him killed. No, I called them to expose him. With your gun? He looked at it as though noticing it for the first time. It was supposed to be found near the back door. Then place it on the floor. He did not move. Blue lights flashed across the windows. A loudspeaker ordered everyone inside to remain still. Daniel hurried down the staircase and pulled the curtains closed. Melissa stepped toward him. Give me the gun. Stay back. She stopped. The pain on her face was unbearable. I trusted you. I was saving our future. You destroyed it. He shook his head violently. Your mother destroyed it when she chose him over us. I chose the truth, I said. You chose a stranger. No. I finally chose myself. That seemed to enrage Margaret more than anything else. For months, Daniel had depended on my silence. He believed age grief and family loyalty would keep me obedient. He had mistaken kindness for weakness. A police negotiator called through Daniel's prepaid phone. He refused to answer. Outside, officers surrounded both properties. Marcus remained in his home under protection, but the false report had described him as the armed intruder. If he stepped outside at the wrong moment, someone could still make a terrible mistake. I moved slowly toward Daniel. Tell them the truth. It is too late. It is not too late to prevent someone from dying. You do not understand. I understand perfectly. You were drowning, and instead of asking for help, you tried to pull everyone else under. His eyes filled with tears. I built that company from nothing. And you lost it. I could have saved it. With my home, it would have stayed in the family. No. It would have disappeared into your debt. He lowered the gun slightly. That was when Melissa moved. She reached for his wrist. Daniel jerked away, and the revolver fired. The sound exploded through the house. Carol screamed. The bullet struck the ceiling, showering plaster across the hallway. Police shouted outside. Daniel stared at the smoking weapon in horror. Melissa backed away, clutching her ears. You almost killed me. I did not mean. Put it down. This time her voice carried something I had never heard before. Authority. Daniel's hand began to shake. The gun slipped from his fingers and struck the carpet. I kicked it beneath the side table. Seconds later, the front door burst open. Officers entered with weapons raised. Hands where we can see them, Daniel dropped to his knees. Melissa lifted both arms. Carol sank against the wall. I stood perfectly still, while officers secured the revolver and handcuffed Daniel. The first officer looked toward me. Is Marcus Reed inside this residence? No, I said clearly. He has never been inside tonight. The report was false. Daniel closed his eyes. The lie was over. Police searched the house. They found the prepaid phone upstairs, muddy clothing near the attic entrance, and copies of Marcus's business cards inside Daniel's pocket. The anonymous 911 call had been pre-recorded using altered audio from an old voicemail Melissa once left him. He had intended to make it sound as though she were hiding from an armed intruder. As officers led Daniel toward the door, he looked at my daughter. I did this for you. Melissa's face crumpled. No, you did it because you could not accept losing. Daniel turned toward me. For one moment, I saw not a monster, but a desperate man who had allowed entitlement to hollow him out. Then he said, You will regret choosing that man over your family. I answered quietly. Marcus did not betray this family. You did. The officers took him outside. I thought the danger had ended. Then a detective entered carrying the prepaid phone. There is a complication, she said. The 12th call had already been distributed through the emergency system. Several officers still believed Marcus might be armed and moving between the properties. Before she could finish, 3 firm knocks sounded at the front door. Every person in the room went silent. An officer checked through the side window. It is Chief Reed. The detective opened the door. Marcus stood beneath the porch light, rainwater running from his coat. He held a sealed folder against his chest. 2 uniformed officers stood behind him. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus stepped inside. His eyes moved from the damaged ceiling to the fallen chair, then to Melissa and Carol. I was informed that my name was used in another false report, he said. Melissa lowered her face. Marcus handed the folder to the detective. This contains the completed internal review of all 12 calls, the property fraud evidence, and the communications recovered from Victor Hale's devices. Carol gripped the edge of the table. Melissa reached for the wine glass she had abandoned at dinner. Marcus looked directly at her. Mrs. Whitmore, we also recovered messages showing you warned your husband that your mother had contacted an attorney before the guardianship petition was filed. The glass slipped from Melissa's hand. It shattered across the floor. I stared at my daughter. She had told me she did not know Daniel's full plan. Marcus's next words made the room feel colder than the storm outside. Your husband may have designed the scheme, but he did not begin it alone. I looked at Melissa as though I were seeing her for the first time. Her face had gone completely pale. Broken glass glittered near her shoes, but she did not move. What does that mean? I asked. Marcus did not answer immediately. He glanced toward the detective, who opened the sealed folder and removed several printed pages. The detective spoke carefully. We recovered messages between Melissa and Daniel dating back nearly 4 months. Melissa's lips trembled. Mom, please let me explain. 4 months, I whispered. 4 months earlier, Robert had still been alive. The detective handed me the first page. The message was from Melissa to Daniel. Dad will never agree while he's alive. We need to wait and make Mom understand she cannot stay there alone. I read it twice. The words blurred. My daughter had been discussing my home before I had even buried my husband. Another message followed. Once Mom is frightened enough, she will let us handle everything. My hands began shaking again. This time, no one dared call it confusion. Melissa stepped toward me. I was scared about your safety. That was before any of the police calls. You were waiting for your father to die. No. Her cry echoed through the damaged hallway. That is not what I meant. What did you mean? She covered her mouth, then lowered her hand. Dad was sick. Daniel's business was collapsing. We were going to lose our house. I thought maybe after Dad was gone, you would sell this place and come live with us. You thought my husband's death would solve your financial problems. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I did not want him to die, but you planned for what you could take afterward. Carol began sobbing quietly near the wall. Marcus remained still. He did not look triumphant. There was no satisfaction in his face, only the heavy sadness of someone who had witnessed this kind of betrayal before. The detective placed another message on the table. This one had been sent after Marcus purchased the neighboring property. Melissa had written, "The new owner ruined the original deal. Find out who he is before Mom gets attached to him." Daniel replied, "If he becomes a problem, we make him look like one." I turned toward my daughter. You knew why Daniel searched Marcus's past. I knew he was checking him. You knew he intended to frighten him away. I did not know how far he would go. Did you make the first call? She closed her eyes. Yes. The word barely came out. The suspicious car, the harmless boxes, the beginning of everything. You watched him unload his belongings, I said. You knew the vehicle belonged to him. Yes? Why did you call? Daniel said we needed a report on record. He said one complaint would not hurt anyone. And the third call. When you said Marcus threatened Daniel, I repeated what Daniel told me. You were standing near the window. You knew there was no threat. She began crying harder. I wanted to believe my husband. No, you wanted the plan to work. Melissa looked as though I had struck her. Perhaps the truth did feel like a blow. The detective explained that Melissa had participated in the early stages of the scheme. She had provided Daniel with copies of my bank statements, medical information, and signature samples. She had also contacted the county office, pretending to seek guidance about an elderly parent with declining memory. However, the recovered messages showed that her cooperation became less certain after the guardianship hearing. She warned Daniel that she wanted to stop, the detective said. She also preserved the emails that later became evidence. I understood what the detective was telling me. Melissa was not innocent, but she was not Daniel. She had entered the plan willingly, then become frightened when its cruelty grew impossible to ignore. I did not know whether that made the betrayal easier or worse. Am I going to be arrested? Melissa asked. The detective's expression remained neutral. That decision belongs to the district attorney. Your cooperation will be considered, but so will your actions. Melissa nodded slowly. Marcus turned toward me. Margaret, the officers will remain nearby tonight. You should not be alone. I am not afraid of being alone. He understood what I meant. I had spent months fearing an empty house after Robert's death. Now I realized solitude was not the same as loneliness. Sometimes the people filling a home could leave you more isolated than silence ever did. Carol wiped her face. What about me? The detective told her that her cooperation would also be reported, but false statements to police and participation in financial exploitation remained serious matters. Carol sank into a chair. For years she had acted like the responsible older sister. She had corrected my decisions, criticized my trust, and warned me about strangers. Yet, she had sold her loyalty for $20,000. The police finished collecting evidence shortly after midnight. Before Marcus left, I stopped him on the porch. Did you know about Melissa when we met at the diner? I suspected she had signed more than the petition. Why didn't you tell me? Because suspicion is not proof. And because I thought you had already suffered enough without hearing an accusation I could not support. I looked through the rain toward his damaged SUV. My family nearly destroyed your career. They tried. And your mother was threatened. Yes. How can you stand here without hating us? Marcus considered the question. I do not judge a family as one person. I have spent my life asking people to be judged by their own actions. His answer carried more grace than I deserved to expect. You defended me when your own family wanted you silent, he continued. That mattered. After he returned home, I found Melissa sitting on the kitchen floor picking up broken glass with her bare fingers. Stop, I said. She looked up. A thin line of blood crossed her palm. I broke everything. You broke the glass. Daniel broke the ceiling. The rest of it took all of you. She began to cry again. I do not expect you to forgive me. That is the first honest thing you have said tonight. She flinched. I brought her a towel and a small box for the glass. I did not bandage her hand. I did not kneel beside her or tell her everything would be all right. For most of her life, whenever Melissa made a mistake, I rushed to soften the consequences. I called teachers, paid bills, explained her behavior, and reminded everyone that she had a good heart. Perhaps I had confused love with rescue. Why did you do it? I asked. She stared at the blood on the towel. Daniel made me feel as though we were one disaster away from losing everything. He said you had more than you needed. He said the house would be mine someday anyway. So you decided someday should come early. I told myself you would be happier with us. Did you ever wonder whether I would be happy at all? Her silence answered me. By morning, Daniel had been formally charged with attempted elder exploitation forgery, conspiracy filing false reports, evidence tampering unlawful entry, and several weapons-related offenses. Victor Hale faced conspiracy and burglary charges. Melissa had not been charged yet. Carol had not been charged yet. The word yet sat over all of us. At 10 o'clock, Evelyn arrived with new locks for every exterior door and a notice requiring Melissa and Carol to leave my home until the investigation was resolved. Melissa packed one suitcase. She paused beside Robert's photograph in the hallway. Dad would hate me. I looked at the picture too. Your father would hate what you did. That is not the same as hating you. Hope flickered across her face. I could not let her mistake it for forgiveness. But love does not erase accountability, I said. You must leave. She nodded and walked outside. I watched my daughter drive away from the home she had tried to take from me. Then I closed the door, turned the new lock, and stood alone in the silence. For the first time since Robert died, the house truly belonged to me again. But reclaiming the house was only the beginning. I still had to decide whether the family that betrayed me could ever earn a place inside it. The morning after Melissa left, I woke before sunrise. For several seconds, I forgot what had happened. I reached toward Robert's side of the bed, expecting the familiar emptiness that had greeted me every morning since his death. Then I heard the quiet house, remembered the shattered glass, the gunshot, and the sound of my daughter's suitcase rolling across the porch. Grief returned in layers. First Robert, then the family I thought I still had. I made coffee and carried it into the living room. The ceiling above the hallway was scarred where the bullet had struck. A fine layer of plaster still covered the rug. I could have called someone to clean it. Instead, I fetched the vacuum myself. Each movement felt like a declaration. This was my floor, my hallway, my home. When I finished, I opened every curtain and let the morning light enter. At 8, the telephone began ringing. Reporters had learned about Daniel's arrest and the 12 false police calls. Some wanted to speak about elder exploitation. Others wanted a dramatic interview about the incoming police chief targeted by his own neighbors. I declined every request. Marcus did the same. His office released a brief statement saying the department would review its response to repeated unverified complaints and strengthen procedures designed to prevent emergency services from being used as tools of harassment. He did not mention my family by name. That restraint protected me more than I deserved. Around noon, Evelyn arrived carrying sandwiches and a stack of legal documents. "The district attorney wants to meet with you tomorrow," she said. "Will I have to testify?" "Almost certainly." The thought made my stomach tighten. I had spent my life avoiding public conflict. Robert used to tease that I could apologize to a chair after bumping into it. The idea of sitting in a courtroom and describing what my own daughter had done felt unbearable. Evelyn seemed to read my face. "You do not have to decide today how you feel about Melissa," she said. "You only have to tell the truth. What if the truth sends her to jail?" The truth did not create her actions. I looked down at my coffee. She copied the emails. Without her, we might never have stopped Daniel. That matters. But she helped him begin. That matters too. There was no simple answer. I wanted one. I wanted Melissa to be either completely innocent or completely cruel, because either choice would have made my next decision easier. Instead, she was my daughter. A frightened, selfish, loving, dishonest woman who had betrayed me and then helped save me from the consequences of that betrayal. That evening, Marcus knocked on my door. Only once. The sound still made my body tense. He stood on the porch holding a casserole dish covered in foil. "My mother made too much food," he said. From the sidewalk, Lillian called. "That is a lie. I made exactly enough and told him to bring half to you." For the first time in days, I laughed. I invited them inside. Marcus hesitated at the threshold. He had never entered my home before the night of Daniel's arrest, and even then he had come surrounded by officers and evidence. "You are welcome here," I said. He stepped inside. Lillian examined the damaged ceiling and shook her head. That man brought violence into a house that was supposed to shelter his family. Her words carried no softness, but there was kindness beneath them. We ate at the kitchen table. Lillian spoke about her years as an emergency room nurse, while Marcus told me his first week as chief had been consumed by meetings, policy reviews, and reporters asking whether he planned to punish the officers who responded to the calls. "Do you?" I asked. "No," he said. Most of them acted according to the information they received. The problem was not that they answered. The problem was that no one recognized the pattern quickly enough. Would they have recognized it if you were not about to become Chief Marcus? Held my gaze. That is the question I am asking them. His honesty settled something inside me. He was not using the experience to seek revenge. He was using it to change a system that had nearly allowed lies to become tragedy. After dinner, Lillian helped me wrap the remaining food. "You look tired," she said. "I am. Tired is not the same as defeated." I smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." "No. I simply lived long enough to stop wasting words." Before leaving, Marcus handed me a card. It contained the number of a victim advocate assigned to the case. "You should not have to navigate the next part alone," he said. The meeting with the district attorney took place the following afternoon. I sat beside Evelyn in a conference room while prosecutors explained the likely charges. Daniel's case was strong. The emails, forged documents, false reports, gun and prepaid phone connected him to nearly every stage of the scheme. Victor had begun negotiating a plea agreement. Carol had agreed to testify in exchange for consideration at sentencing. Melissa remained the difficult question. She participated in the first 3 calls, the prosecutor said. She provided financial and medical information, without permission signed the guardianship petition, and helped create the claim that you were mentally declining. My throat tightened. She also preserved the emails. Yes, and she stood between Daniel and me when he had the gun. Yes, the prosecutor folded her hands. We are considering a cooperation agreement. It would require her to plead guilty to reduce charges, testify fully, return any benefit received from the scheme, and complete probation and community service. No jail. That would depend on the judge. I stared at the table. Part of me wanted Melissa punished severely enough that she could never dismiss what she had done. Another part pictured her at 7 years old running into my bedroom after a nightmare and climbing beneath the covers between Robert and me. Memory is cruel that way. It does not disappear merely because someone has hurt you. What do you need from me? I asked. Your statement will influence sentencing, but the final decision is not yours. That brought unexpected relief. I did not have to become my daughter's judge. I only had to become the honest witness to what she had done. After the meeting, I asked Evelyn to take me to see Melissa. She was staying at a small motel near the interstate. When she opened the door, she looked older than she had a week before. There were dark circles beneath her eyes. Her hair was unwashed, and Robert's old college sweatshirt hung loosely around her body. Mom. I did not hug her. She stepped aside and let me enter. The room smelled of coffee and cleaning solution. Legal papers covered the small desk. I met with the district attorney, I said. Melissa nodded. My lawyer told me, they may offer you reduced charges if I testify. Will you? Yes, even if Daniel tells everyone you betrayed him? Her face tightened. I already betrayed you. The answer sounded rehearsed, but the pain behind it was real. I sat in the chair beside the window. Why did you save the emails? At first, I wanted insurance against Daniel. Insurance. If the plan failed, I wanted proof that it was his idea. The honesty hurt. She did not try to make herself noble. When did that change? I asked. The night he threatened Marcus's mother. I realized there was no line he would not cross. But you still stayed. I was afraid. So was Marcus. So was I. I know. No, Melissa, you are beginning to know. She lowered her eyes. I told her I would not ask the prosecutor to excuse her actions. I would also not demand the harshest punishment. You will face what you did, I said. Whatever happens next must be built on truth. Tears rolled down her face. Is there any chance you will forgive me? I stood. Forgiveness is not a door you knock on once and expect someone to open. She nodded. What do I do? For once, stop asking me to make your path easier. I left her sitting alone beside the scattered legal papers. Outside, evening traffic moved along the highway. My heart ached, but I did not turn back. The next morning, Melissa signed the cooperation agreement, and for the first time in her life, my daughter chose to tell the truth without knowing whether it would bring her home. Daniel's preliminary hearing began 6 weeks later. By then, winter had settled over the city. The maple trees along our street stood bare, and a thin crust of frost covered the lawns each morning. Marcus had replaced the broken window in his SUV, but for weeks afterward, I still saw tiny pieces of glass shining near the edge of his driveway. Some damage remained even after the obvious repairs were finished. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Evelyn and I arrived. Cameras turned toward us immediately. Mrs. Parker, do you believe your daughter should go to prison? Did Chief Reed use his position to influence the investigation? Are you planning to sell your home? Evelyn guided me through the doors without allowing me to answer. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat beside his attorney, wearing a dark blue suit. His hair was neatly combed, and he looked thinner than before. If someone had seen him without knowing the charges, they might have mistaken him for a respectable businessman facing an unfortunate misunderstanding. That was one of Daniel's greatest talents. He knew how to make cruelty look reasonable. Melissa sat behind the prosecutor's table with her lawyer. She wore a plain gray dress and held her hands tightly in her lap. She did not look toward Daniel. Carol sat several rows behind us. Marcus entered through a side door with Lillian. Although he was the police chief, he wore no uniform. He had chosen an ordinary black suit, perhaps because he wanted the case judged on evidence rather than authority. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod. The prosecutor presented the accusations. One by one, forged documents, attempted exploitation, conspiracy, false emergency reports, evidence tampering, unlawful possession of a weapon, and the plan to frame Marcus as an armed intruder. Daniel's attorney described him as a desperate husband who had made poor decisions while trying to save his family's business. Poor decisions. The phrase angered me. A poor decision was forgetting to pay a bill. Daniel had constructed a trap around my life and tightened it day by day. Victor Hale testified first. His plea agreement required complete cooperation. He admitted that Daniel approached him with a proposal to acquire both homes below market value. Victor would use a shell company to make the purchase after police reports and legal disputes damaged the neighborhood's reputation. "Did Mr. Whitmore tell you Margaret Parker had agreed to sell?" the prosecutor asked. "No." "What did he say?" Victor looked toward Daniel. "He said she would not have a choice once the guardianship was approved." A murmur moved through the courtroom. Daniel remained expressionless. Victor also admitted entering my backyard with lockpicks and carrying one of Marcus's business cards. He had planned to leave the card inside my home so investigators would believe Marcus had broken in. "Were you aware that Mr. Reed was the incoming chief of police?" "Yes." "Did that concern you?" Victor gave a bitter laugh. "It concerned me." Daniel said it made the payoff bigger. If Reed was publicly humiliated, he would sell quickly to avoid scandal. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. Carol testified next. "I had never seen my sister look so small." She admitted accepting $20,000. She confessed to calling the police about Marcus's mother and inventing the story that Marcus had followed and threatened her. "Why did you do it?" the prosecutor asked. Carol's voice cracked. "I was in debt. Daniel told me Margaret would eventually forgive me because we were sisters." I closed my eyes. Daniel had understood our family's weakest habit. We believed blood guaranteed forgiveness. He had counted on it. When Melissa's name was called, Daniel finally moved. He turned toward her for the first time. The look he gave her was not loving. It was a warning. Melissa walked to the witness stand and took the oath. Her hands trembled, but her voice remained clear. She described the financial pressure in their marriage. Daniel had hidden the company's losses until creditors began calling their home. When he suggested using my property, she resisted at first. Then he reminded her that she would inherit it someday. "I began thinking of my mother's house as something that was already partly mine," she said. That was wrong. The prosecutor showed her the messages discussing Robert's death. Melissa began crying. "I did not want my father to die, but I thought that after he died, my mother would be easier to persuade." The words hurt, even though I had already read them. Hearing them spoken aloud made the betrayal real in a new way. Melissa admitted making the first police call. She admitted supporting the false story about Marcus threatening Daniel. She admitted giving Daniel samples of my signature and private medical information. Then she described the moment she realized the plan had become dangerous. When Daniel threatened Mrs. Reed, I knew he was willing to harm people who had done nothing to us. But I still did not leave immediately. "Why not?" the prosecutor asked. "Because leaving would have forced me to admit what I had become." Daniel's attorney rose for cross-examination. He approached slowly. Mrs. Whitmore, your cooperation agreement may keep you out of prison, correct? It may. So you have a reason to blame your husband. I have a reason to tell the truth. Was Daniel the only person who benefited from your mother's property? No. You expected to inherit it? Yes. You participated willingly? Yes. His attorney paused, perhaps surprised that she did not resist. Then why should this court believe you now? Melissa looked toward me, not at Daniel, at me, because I spent months lying to protect what I wanted. Telling the truth is the only thing I have left to give my mother. The courtroom became silent. Daniel stared down at the table. For the first time, I saw something in Melissa that did not resemble fear. It resembled responsibility. After the hearing recessed, I found her alone near the restroom corridor. She did not approach me. I meant what I said, she told me. I know. I'm not asking you to forgive me. That is good. She nodded. Daniel was brought past us in handcuffs. He stopped when he saw Melissa. You think they will love you again because you cried on the stand, he said. A deputy told him to keep moving. Daniel leaned closer. Your mother will never look at you without remembering what you did. Melissa flinched. I could have remained silent. Instead, I stepped beside her. That may be true, I said. But remembering is not the same as refusing to heal. Daniel's expression changed. He had expected my pain to remain useful to him. The deputy led him away. That afternoon, the judge ruled there was enough evidence for the case to proceed to trial. Daniel's attorney requested bail, arguing that he no longer posed a danger. The prosecutor disagreed. She presented one final piece of evidence recovered from Daniel's abandoned truck. It was a handwritten list. At the top were the words, people who must be dealt with before trial. Marcus's name was first. Mine was second. Melissa's was third. The judge denied bail. As Daniel was removed from the courtroom, he looked back at the three of us. Marcus, Melissa, me. His plan had begun by turning us against one another. Now the truth had placed us on the same side. But outside the courthouse, Evelyn received a phone call that changed the mood entirely. Someone had broken into my house during the hearing. Nothing valuable appeared to be missing. Only one object had been taken, Robert's original letter to Melissa. We returned home under a sky the color of wet cement. 2 patrol cars were parked outside, and yellow tape crossed the side entrance. Mrs. Alvarez stood on her porch with both hands pressed to her chest. I am so sorry, Margaret, she called. I saw a man near your house, but I thought he was one of the repair workers. Inside drawers had been opened, and papers scattered across Robert's study. His desk chair lay on its side. The intruder had ignored my jewelry, television, and checkbook. He had searched for documents. The detective led us to the filing cabinet, where I had placed Robert's letter after Evelyn returned it. The envelope was gone. Melissa stood in the doorway, staring at the empty drawer. Did you ever read it? She asked. No. Her face tightened. Why not? Because it was addressed to you. Even after everything she had done, I had respected the privacy of a letter my husband wrote to his daughter. Melissa lowered her eyes. Evelyn touched my arm. The original may be missing, but it is not lost as evidence. I too turned toward her. What do you mean? I scanned every document before returning them. I have a certified copy in my office. Relief moved through me, followed quickly by anger. Whoever entered my home had frightened me, violated Robert's study and stolen something irreplaceable, yet the attempt to erase his words had failed. The side door showed no sign of forced entry. Someone had used a key. Melissa looked toward the lock. Daniel had one. We changed the locks, I said. He copied the new key. My stomach dropped. How? The morning the locksmith came, he pressed my key into a piece of putty. I saw him do it. Why did you say nothing I didn't understand then? No, I said. You chose not to understand. She accepted the words without defending herself. Mrs. Alvarez's camera had captured the intruder clearly enough for detectives to identify him. His name was Paul Mercer, a former foreman at Daniel's construction company. Police found him that evening at a motel outside the city. Robert's letter was inside his car, still sealed. Paul confessed that Daniel had given him instructions weeks before the arrest. If Daniel's legal situation became serious, Paul was to enter my house and retrieve any handwritten documents belonging to Robert. Daniel had promised him $10,000. Paul never received it. The theft added another obstruction charge, but its emotional purpose disturbed me more than its legal one. Daniel had feared a dead man's words. The next morning, Evelyn brought the recovered envelope to my house. The edges were bent, but Robert's handwriting remained clear. Melissa sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I think you should open it," I said. Her hands shook as she lifted the flap. Inside were 4 handwritten pages. She began reading silently, but after the first paragraph, tears filled her eyes. "What did he say?" I asked. Melissa tried to continue, but her voice failed. She handed me the pages. "My dearest Melissa, if you are reading this, then I am no longer there to say these things myself. I hope you remember first that I loved you from the day your mother placed you in my arms." The words blurred, and I stopped until I could breathe again. Robert wrote that he knew Daniel's company was in serious trouble. Daniel had asked him repeatedly to use our home as collateral, and Robert had refused. "A business can be rebuilt," he wrote. "A home taken from an elderly woman cannot be returned with an apology." He reminded Melissa that my house was not an inheritance waiting to be collected. It was the place where I had built my life. Then came the sentence that broke her. "Your mother will be grieving when I am gone. Protect her grief. Do not use it to make her doubt herself." Melissa covered her face and began sobbing. Robert had seen the danger before I did. He had known his daughter's weaknesses, but he had also believed she could choose better. The final paragraph was addressed to her alone. "A good daughter is not one who controls her mother's life. She is one who respects that her mother still has a life of her own. If Daniel asks you to choose between your marriage and what is right, remember that love which demands wrongdoing is not love. It is fear wearing love's clothes." Melissa lowered her hands. He knew. "Yes, and I did exactly what he begged me not to do." "Yes." I did not soften the answer. She folded the pages carefully. "I wish you were here so I could tell him I'm sorry. Then, live in a way that proves you understood him." The trial began 2 months later. Paul Mercer's confession destroyed Daniel's final defense. Victor testified. Carol testified. Melissa testified again, this time before a jury. I took the stand last. Daniel watched me as I described the forged signature the police calls the guardianship petition, and the night he entered my home with Robert's revolver. His attorney asked whether grief had affected my judgment. Of course it did. I answered, "Grief affected my sleep, my appetite, and my heart. It did not erase my right to decide who controls my life." The jury heard recordings of Daniel discussing the competency route. They saw emails describing the police calls as a pressure campaign. They listened to the false 911 report he created using Melissa's voice. On the 4th day, Daniel changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy, attempted elder exploitation, forgery, obstruction, unlawful entry, evidence tampering, and weapons offenses. At sentencing, he stood before the judge and apologized. He said desperation had clouded his judgment. He said he had wanted to save his company and protect his wife. Then the judge asked why protecting his wife required stealing from her mother and risking an innocent man's life. Daniel had no answer. He was sentenced to 11 years in state prison and ordered to pay restitution. Victor received 6 years under his plea agreement. Paul received probation after cooperating and returning the letter. Carol pleaded guilty to filing false reports and participating in attempted exploitation. She received probation community service and an order to repay the $20,000. Melissa pleaded guilty to reduced charges involving the misuse of my records and false statements. The judge sentenced her to 5 years of supervised probation, 600 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. She was also prohibited from managing another person's finances during probation. After the hearing, reporters waited outside. Marcus stood several feet away in his chief's uniform. He did not approach until the cameras were gone. "It is finished," he said. "The court case is." He nodded. Healing would take longer. Melissa stood alone near the courthouse doors. For months, she had asked whether I would forgive her. This time, she asked a different question. "What can I do today that does not make things worse?" I looked at my daughter and saw the first small evidence that she was changing. "Walk with me," I said. "Not home, not yet, but forward." A year after Daniel's sentencing, the maple trees turned gold again. The anniversary arrived quietly. There were no reporters outside my house, no police cars at Marcus's curb, and no family members studying my windows as though my life belonged to them. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee and watched Lillian walk toward her mailbox. She lifted her cane in greeting. "Beautiful morning," she called. "It is." The word felt larger than the weather. My home had changed during that year, but not because anyone had taken it from me. I chose the changes. I repaired the ceiling where Robert's revolver had fired. I painted the hallway a soft blue and replaced the heavy curtains Melissa had installed with lighter ones that allowed the sun inside. Robert's study became a reading room where I kept his letters, our family photographs, and a new desk of my own. Evelyn helped me create an updated estate plan. The house remained entirely under my control for as long as I lived. After my death, a portion of its value would support the library's literacy program and a local organization assisting victims of elder exploitation. Melissa would receive something too, but no longer because she expected it. An inheritance, I had learned, should be a final expression of love, not a reward people can demand in advance. Marcus's first year as police chief was not easy. The 12 calls became part of a department-wide training program about repeated harassment-biased reporting and the danger of treating each complaint as an isolated event. Dispatchers were taught to identify patterns. Supervisors reviewed repeated calls from the same address. Officers received new guidance on separating genuine safety concerns from attempts to weaponize the police against neighbors. Marcus never presented himself as the hero of those reforms. He spoke instead about the countless people who did not have a title, an attorney, or a future police chief living next door when someone decided to target them. At a community meeting, he said authority should not determine whether a person is treated with dignity. Dignity should come first. I sat beside Lillian in the front row. Afterward, she leaned toward me. He practiced that speech in my kitchen 12 times. I smiled, once for every call. That is what I told him. Marcus heard us and shook his head, but he was smiling too. Carol's road back into my life was slower. For 6 months, I did not invite her into my home. We spoke only during counseling sessions, arranged through her probation program. At first, she apologized constantly, but avoided discussing the money. Then one afternoon, she finally admitted the truth. She had resented me for years. Robert and I had a stable marriage, a comfortable home, and enough savings to feel secure. Carol had struggled after her husband died and believed I had received the easier life. Daniel recognized that resentment and fed it. He made me feel as if helping him take control of your house was correcting something unfair, she said. But your life was never stolen from me. I simply wanted what you had. Hearing that hurt, but it also allowed us to begin rebuilding honestly. Carol repaid the money by selling her expensive car and taking part-time work at a medical office. She completed community service at a senior legal clinic where she answered phones for people frightened about fraud and guardianship abuse. The work changed her, or perhaps accountability gave her the chance to change herself. The first time I invited her back into my kitchen, she stood at the doorway and waited. "You do not need to ask permission to enter," I said. "Yes," she replied. "I do." So I invited her in. Melissa's return was more difficult. She and Daniel divorced while he was in prison. She sold their mortgaged home, and most of the proceeds went to creditors. She moved into a small apartment and found work at a nonprofit housing agency. For her community service, she assisted older homeowners with paperwork fraud warnings and property records. The irony was painful, but she did not run from it. Every Sunday afternoon, she called me. At first, our conversations lasted 5 minutes. She asked how I was feeling, then stopped herself and changed the question. "What have you been doing this week?" That difference mattered. She was learning that caring about my life was not the same as monitoring my condition. Over time, 5 minutes became 15, then 30. We discussed books, recipes, Robert's terrible jokes, and the counseling sessions she attended twice a month. She never asked about my will. She never mentioned the house unless I brought it up. 6 months after the sentencing, she asked whether she could visit. I told her we could meet at the diner, the same diner where Marcus had first shown me the evidence. Melissa arrived early and sat in the back booth. She looked nervous when I approached. "I ordered coffee for you," she said, "but I asked them to bring it after you arrived so it wouldn't get cold. It was a small thing." But healing often begins with small things done differently. She told me she had been asked to speak during a workshop about family financial abuse. I said no. At first, she admitted, I felt like a hypocrite. "What changed your mind?" My counselor said. Pretending I had never done it would be more hypocritical. "What will you tell them?" The truth. That people who exploit family do not always begin by thinking of themselves as criminals. Sometimes they begin by saying they deserve something or that they are only helping. I looked at her carefully. "And what did you tell yourself? That I was protecting you from loneliness?" "Were you?" "No. I was protecting myself from losing the future I thought you owed me." That answer did not erase the past, but it showed me she had finally stopped hiding from it. When we finished eating, Melissa walked me to my car. "May I hug you?" she asked. She had never asked before. She had always assumed access to me because she was my daughter. I opened my arms. The hug was gentle and uncertain. We both cried, but neither of us said everything was forgiven. Not yet. Perhaps forgiveness was not a single moment. Perhaps it was a bridge rebuilt one careful board at a time. 3 months later, I invited Melissa to my home for Sunday dinner. She stood on the porch, holding a lemon pie from the same bakery Marcus had visited when he first moved into the neighborhood. Marcus and Lillian joined us. Carol brought roasted vegetables and arrived 10 minutes early. For the first time since Robert's death, my dining room was full without feeling occupied. We spoke honestly. We laughed carefully at first, then freely. After dinner, Melissa helped clear the dishes. She paused beside the framed copy of Robert's letter in the reading room. "I think Dad would be relieved," she said. "I think he would be watching what you do next." She nodded. "So am I." Outside, Marcus was examining the new fence between our properties. Daniel's false boundary marker was long gone. In its place, Marcus and I had installed a small gate, not because either of us had a claim on the other's land, because trust offered freely is different from access taken without permission. As the evening ended, Melissa stood beside her car. "Thank you for letting me come home." I considered her words. "This is my home," I said gently, "but you are welcome to visit." For a moment, sadness crossed her face. Then she smiled. "I understand." That was how I knew the lesson had finally reached her. The next morning, I walked onto my porch and looked across the lawn. Marcus was leaving for work in his uniform. Lillian waved from the window. A year earlier, my family had looked at that house and seen an obstacle, a threat, and an opportunity to exploit fear. I saw neighbors. I saw people who had shown me dignity when my own family tried to take mine. Most importantly, I saw myself clearly. I was not a helpless widow. I was not a burden waiting to be managed. I was not an inheritance waiting to be divided. I was Margaret Parker. I had loved, deeply grieved, honestly trusted unwisely, and survived betrayal. My family had called the police 12 times, hoping each lie would weaken the man next door and tighten their control over me. Instead, Every call brought the truth closer to our door. And when Marcus finally knocked, he did not come to take my home. He brought me the evidence I needed to reclaim it. Ket thuk fan moilum. Some people believe the greatest danger to a family comes from strangers. But sometimes the deepest wounds are caused by those who know exactly where we are vulnerable. Melissa knew I was grieving. Daniel knew I trusted my family. Carol knew I feared losing the people I loved. They used those truths to make me question my own judgment. Yet this story taught me that love without respect is not protection. It is control. Being older does not mean our choices belong to our children. Grief does not make us incompetent. Generosity does not create a debt that others are entitled to collect. And family loyalty should never require us to remain silent while someone harms us or an innocent neighbor. I also learned that justice and healing are not opposites. Justice required Daniel to face prison, Carol to repay what she took, and Melissa to admit her role without excuses. Healing began only after consequences made denial impossible. Forgiveness did not mean pretending nothing happened. It did not mean returning everyone to their old place in my life. It meant allowing change to become possible while protecting the boundaries I had fought to reclaim. Marcus taught me another lesson. We should never judge a person by someone else's fear rumors or accusations. My family wanted the police to see a dangerous black man. What stood next door was a principled leader, a devoted son, and a neighbor who risked his peace to help me find the truth. So, I want to ask you something. Could you forgive Melissa after what she did? Or would you have closed the door forever? What would you have done after discovering that your own family was planning to take control of your home? Please share your honest thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. Your experience may give courage to someone who feels ignored, controlled, or betrayed by the people closest to them. And if this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe for more emotional stories about family justice, resilience, and second chances. Always remember, it is never too late to defend your voice, reclaim your dignity, and decide who deserves a place in your life.